Welcome back to the Writer's Workshop, where we give you the tools to unleash your creativity and flourish. I am Lady V.
I'm Alice Brown.
And today we are going over writing believable kingdoms. This is a very crucial detail, especially when you're writing fantasy.
Or sci-fi, either one. Yes, very important.
So let's get started. The key to this core foundation, kingdoms are not just random settings in your novel. They need to be systems, people, a culture that you develop.
Politics,
yes. Your kingdom definitely has to be not just a random setting, just something that's kind of thrown into your book. It needs to be flushed out, a part of the actual story, even if it is the kingdom where the bad guy lives and you're not really focused on it too much. It still cannot just be, the kingdom of the Blackwells and then boom, done. You're going to have to
flush it out,
build it up, describe it, and really make it part of that character's, even if it's your bad character's, identity.
It is also important to establish your power structure within your story, on your kingdom. Who rules and why do they rule? Do you have just a king or one person ruling, or is this a council type thing or a group setting that rules? Again, explain why, whichever way you choose, that you've chosen that way for your kingdom.
Yeah, if you have just one person running your kingdom, why that one person? Is it through bloodline? Is it through rivalry and whoever won the kingdom? Definitely have a story behind it as to why that person is in charge.
Sometimes the backstory is just as important as the story in a book.
It is, very much so. I've known several authors who have talked about when writing backstory, even if it doesn't make it into your novel, sometimes it's fun and crucial to write the backstory of everybody on a separate document. Mm-hmm. So you yourself know where that history is and what all goes into it, even if it never makes it into the actual book. It's kind of like video editing. Mm-hmm. When movie producers make movies, there's all this extra footage that never makes the cut, but it's what makes the story.
Well, and I think it brings the characters to life for the writer too.
Kind of makes them more three-dimensional.
Mm-hmm. And that's very important.
Hierarchy among your people or species helps build a pecking order within your kingdom and story. Mm-hmm. This can be based off of the different types of characters. If you have dragon shifters, vampires, orcs, other different types of creatures and people, humans, you want to establish a good pecking order of where they all fall with each other. Mm-hmm. Kind of like the natural food chain, where everybody falls in line. What are their social rankings based on? Is it by status? Is it by strength, wealth? Flush all of that out to figure out how your kingdom actually works.
You're actually building a society.
You are.
And so that society needs all the working pieces that a normal society has.
Yeah, take a look at the normal human society and pick it apart to find what all goes into the workings of the human race and the human society, and figure out what you can take on those points to help build your own kingdom, to keep it running smoothly as if it were a real kingdom.
Every kingdom needs a solid line of defense. We had fun exploring this ourselves when we did the Dragon of Dragonos series. Yes. We set up an area at the very edge of town called Mount Ermont, and that is the first line of defense for Dragonos. The dragons that sit on that mountaintop and around the mountain are on lookout constantly, watching for the enemy. And if the enemy should approach, half of that line of dragons goes out to meet them, to be the first line of defense, to fight them. The other half come into town to alert everybody else that they've got trouble on the way.
I like how we designed that to where it was almost like the mountain could see everything. It could see the kingdom, it could see the town, but it could also see the outlayer of where the enemy would approach from. Mm-hmm, they had eyes everywhere to protect their kingdom.
And then we set up the inside of the mountain, set up almost like
barracks.
Yeah, small apartments type thing, so that when the dragons were down, they had their own living quarters and communal areas and
that was a really
recreation
fun one to
areas. Yeah, it was. Training, loyalty, and chain of command are also just as important. And we had fun delving into the Dragonos series with that as well. Setting up training with the King's Guards, and even involving the King's own sons.
His cousin Blaine from Sci-FiFantasy.
Yep, when Blaine shows up in Dragonos, he's part of that training also. You also need to delve into what happens if leadership is threatened. Do you have a second in command? We did this ourselves with the Dragonos series, where we had Blaine get injured. Actually, Blaine and Dominic both get injured in book 1. And when one dragon hurts, they all hurt. But you also, in book 5, King Thorn purposely takes himself out of leadership for a short period to take care of his mate, and he hands all the responsibility over to the second in command, which is Blaine, his cousin.
Next, you're going to want to establish what the daily life looks like within your kingdom. What does the average citizen go through in their day-to-day life? Establish different ranks between civilian, warrior, and royalty. You definitely want to have a difference there. And that was another one that we had a lot of fun.
Yes, developing the town and the whole shopping area, and even in the middle of the stores where you had the outside booths.
Yes.
And you could tell, without me really coming out and saying it, that the shop owners on the outside in the buildings were a little bit better off than the group in the middle. That were just out there, with open tables.
So there was a natural difference there in caliber of just your civilians. But that was really fun to develop, their homes and their shops and what everything looked like, what their day-to-day activities were in their life. And that helped build the core backbone, I believe, to the Dragonos kingdom for us.
Yes, it did. The next thing you want to look at is your kingdom's economy. What does it look like? How do they get their resources? What type of money exchange is there? That sort of thing.
We definitely developed a nice system with Dragonos where they thrived on their own, but there was also resources coming in through the portals that, one of the favorite things among the dragons is fireball whiskey, obviously.
Yes.
And so there is definitely, like through Blaine,
flow.
There's always a constant flow through the portal delivering fireball whiskey to Dragonos.
Most of their food we had locally grown, right there on Dragonos.
But even their money system, there was credit cards that the royalty had to be able to hand out to their mates or their loved ones and go, here, spend what you need. It all thrives together.
Yeah, I took it to more like a digital money system.
Digital currency. I loved how our kingdom was both kind of fantasy old style, but modern fantasy tech. So there was a nice in-between there. Yes, they had electricity and they had technology, but they rode horse and buggy. They were very much
horse and wagon,
Yeah, they were very much down to earth.
Your women were very much in your older style clothes.
Modest clothes,
modest clothes. Because when, Natasha showed up in her
leather boots,
leather pants. They're like, say what? And she's like, you expect me to wear one of those old-fashioned Kremlin dresses?
But there was also very much the style of just a flowy tunic and pants and matching scarf. It wasn't all just the old-fashioned garb.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to make it where you still had some of your older dragons that wanted that old-fashioned garb, but as the mates of Dragonos started coming in and bringing with them more and more up-to-date clothing from Earth, they were starting to get on board with things.
Yep. Explore the traditions that make up your kingdom. And the differences in mate bonds or rituals, celebrations, community and royalty and dragons all coming together. We had numerous different avenues where we really enjoyed this on the Dragonos series. We had them coming together for mate ceremonies where it was a celebrated thing for two dragons to find each other. We also had in book 2, I believe, where it started, where King Thorin had come to Earth and found that people got together to watch outdoor movies and was like, you know what, I like this. I want to implement this for my kingdom, where everybody can forget the difference between royalty and civilian, and everybody can come together and have fun and enjoy a movie every once in a while.
Yeah, he also brought back to Draganos the whole idea of setting up a playground area for the kids. And then in book 4, we set up a carnival, a first ever carnival.
That was fun.
Came straight from Earth's idea, and they brought things in, and they even had dragons giving kiddos rides up, like similar to, what am I thinking of? There's a carnival ride where they just...
Yeah, where it just kind of goes around a little bit. I don't remember the name of it, but...
And so we had safety straps for the kids and safety seats to sit in.
Almost like harnessed saddles for the dragons to wear for the kids to be strapped in on.
So they wouldn't fall or anything. And they didn't go very high anyway, but the kids were riding a dragon, so they loved it. You always want to make sure you include conflict, because let's face it, what is a story without some type of conflict?
I would tend to think a rather boring one.
Yes, yeah, it would be. Now, this conflict can come from many different areas. You can have outside interference, as we did with the dragon's mortal enemy, the Raptorians. You could have conflict between mates, which we did in numerous stories too.
Ruby Meyer was a great one on that one.
Yes.
So was Sci-FiFantasy.
Yes. You even conflict between or within each other.
Eternal conflict.
Internal conflict. That got brought out in book 4 and 5 and even 6 immensely, where these women that were held prisoner, they were released, but they had to overcome all that hardship and trauma and nightmares and everything else. But it beefs up the story. It adds to the story.
Well, technically there's internal conflict in all of them, because the dragons are always arguing with their human counterpart. The two hardly ever align with each other's thinking.
Yeah, very true, which we did that straight from the beginning with Sci-FiFantasy. We had read so many shifter books where the personality of the animal and the personality of the human just meshed and everything went along great. And we were like, how boring is that? No, we're going down left field here.
Everybody always asks me, where did we come up with the inspiration for that? Because they're just like, that's such a foreign idea. And honestly, as cliche as it sounds, my cats.
Yes.
That is the honest answer, because I am convinced if there are cats, there were dragons. They're one and the same, pretty much, to me. And so every time that something would happen and the cat would give me that side-eyed look like, are you kidding me? I was like, that's the dragon.
Yep.
That is the dragon's personality right there. And so the dragon's personality was born from my cats.
Yeah, I'm convinced that everybody who writes dragons, all writers that write dragons, have cats.
Yeah, at least one.
Yeah.
At least one. And then we have the external relations. What are the differences between your allies and your enemies? How does Draganos and dragons react to humans, vampires, wolves, others? You're definitely going to want to explore this. And this was something we greatly did in Fire and Ice, book 2 of the Dragons of Draganos series, because King Thorn came to Earth after his sons and ran into a vampire who pretty much said, this is my territory. You're going to be here, you're doing things my way.
Yep.
And he graciously took that step back and went, okay, I'm here. I'm on your world. I'll play by your rules. And it was definitely a check and balance system that we had going between Tony and King Thorn.
Yep.
Definitely.
But we also did that in book 6, Elise Trine, at the end, when they had the big battle.
Yes.
There was a wolf shifter and a vampire, both in the middle of that fight, that came from Earth to help. And King Thorn was very gracious in welcoming them and welcoming the extra help. And
yep. So it's definitely good to have that check and balance system between all your different characters, creatures, species.
Well, even in book 4, Remethist, yes, King Thorn is in charge of the kingdom, but you find out in book 4 that there's actually somebody above him.
Yes.
And
that was fun.
Yes, and that's the Mother of the Lake, where all dragons begin and end. And by book 5, she was having some fun with King Thorn.
Yeah. Yeah, and she also kind of put him in his place in the final showdown of book 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And now it is time to mix it all together.
Mm-hmm.
Creating your layers within your story is what enriches the depth of your reader's immersion. And that is what makes a truly chef's kiss experience for reading a book, is when you can find all those different layers and truly open a book before you and immerse yourself so completely that everything around you disappears.
Yeah. We're not talking info dumping, not at all.
No.
Write down all your information, work out all your details, and then slowly start weaving them into your story a little at a time as you progress with the story.
I think even if it's a multi-book series, you don't even have to fit everything into book 1 on how your castle looks and how the structure of the kingdom functions. Feed it in little bits at a time as it is necessary for the story without it being info dumping.
Yeah, we certainly didn't do everything in book 1. It clearly, we brought in new elements clear through book 6.
Also, another great way for doing the show and not tell when you're building your kingdom is put it in the perspective of your character's point of view. You know, your character is walking up to the castle of Dragonos and they're like, oh my goodness, this is the largest castle I have ever seen with garden mazes, and make it come from the character rather than just the castle sat in the east side of the country and had garden mazes. In that way, it becomes more immersive for the person who is reading through the character's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to do it for today's video. We hope you enjoyed. Let us know how your world building is coming and how your kingdom is being developed. Let us know the name of your kingdom.
Yes.
I would love to know that. And until next time, always remember, don't stop learning and never stop dreaming.